It came in 2008. And not a single day, not a single second, not a single hour, we have had a downfall.
Is it still an investable market, and still can he make profits in the future?
Bitcoin can become hackable in coming future.
What my idea of what Bitcoin fundamentally is digital gold.
A blockchain is a wagon. It's a train.
Next, you had mentioned something about a zombie Bitcoin. So can you tell us what that is? Welcome to Coin GMX. This is an online portal for crypto education. Today we have with us our first panelist, Elias. Elias is the first known currency. He is known as a crypto historian, and he's the first crypto historian. He is also a director of Roku Exchange. He is also known as a leading expert in the blockchain law, and therefore he has been a distinguished speaker at many forums on cryptos. So I think all over the world in the crypto conferences that has taken place, he has been a distinguished speaker there. Welcome, Elias. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Our second speaker is Mr. Hemang Joshi. So he is the brains behind the technology that runs the cryptos. So he's a blockchain developer at Token Minds, and he is also an AI facilitator at UNESCO Center of Peace. He's also a cryptography researcher. So Hemang, welcome. Happy to have you here.
Thanks for the introduction, Prachi, and it's an honor to be a part of this panel today.
Thank you. So let me start with you, asking you a question. The Bitcoin in the last 5 years has risen significantly. So for a person who is wanting to enter the crypto market today, is it still an investable market, and still can he make profits in the future?
Well, of course, no one can tell the future. No one can say what will go up or what will go down. But I think the question is there room for potential price increases? And considering that, yes, there has been large price increases in the past, and many might consider that means that it's gone as high as it can. To that, I would say that what's interesting about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency generally is that it's a very young technology. It's existed for less than 15 years still at this point. And if we think about the public consciousness that has been ignited with this in recent years, it can be said that it's happened very fast. And when something happens very fast, then it could mean one of two things. It could mean that we're still at the beginning and there's a long way to go. It could alternatively mean that this is the end, and because you're hearing this now, it's too late and it's going to go to zero. Now, me personally, I think it's probably not going to go to zero. And I would look at bigger trends that are happening in the world. Very recently, in recent months, in the recent year, we've had what we could call mainstream adoption from investment funds, ETFs, trusts in the US. On the US stock market, we have a major US company, MicroStrategy, which is on the S&P 500, I believe, and having Bitcoin as a primary part of their strategy. And if we follow political events, let's say in the US, which is a leader of the world markets currently, you look at things that the Trump administration is saying regarding wanting Bitcoin to be part of the US national financial strategy, wanting to incorporate it in various ways. Different states are saying that putting forward laws that they want the potential to hold Bitcoin on their balance sheets in their state treasuries. It's a lot of very powerful and very smart people that see a future in making a lot of money with Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. And that would suggest that would only be possible if at least the current prices are somewhat sustained and possibly grown. So if we're looking at a scenario where it loses 80% of its value in the coming years for the long term, then all of this is for nothing, which of course could be the case. But me personally, I'm optimistic towards the future.
Let me ask a follow-on question to that, because in India, people like holding whatever their assets are in cash, or say in gold, or in property documents which they can hold in their hands and they can keep it at home. But Bitcoin is something which is a technology. It is digital. People don't still understand it. But in your book, where you have written two famous books on cryptos. And in your book, Elias, you have mentioned something about a physical Bitcoin. So can you elaborate more on that?
Certainly. So fundamentally, Bitcoin is, of course, digital. You cannot physically hold Bitcoin because Bitcoin exists as data. What that means is that uh, you have a private key and a public key, just like you have a bank account with a password and a public bank account number. You have a Bitcoin address with a Bitcoin address, and that is the public address and the private key, which you can use as a key to unlock it and thus then elsewhere. So when we talk about physical Bitcoin, or really the word today is self-custody, that means that you yourself control the key to the Bitcoin. Now, if you hold Bitcoin on an exchange, be it Binance or Coinbase, or I know that you have various other exchanges operating in India, fundamentally that is called custody Bitcoin. That means that you don't hold your Bitcoin yourself. It's held on your behalf in an exchange. And if that, just like your money in the bank, just like if you own stocks, the stocks might be held in a brokerage. And this has many good sides. I'm an exchange CEO myself, building Roku as a European exchange, as a sister company of a Nigerian entity. So I'm not here to say exchanges are bad by any means, but I want to say that the alternative way of holding cryptocurrency is physically. That is in possession of the private key. And there, if you lose the private key, you lose all access to the cryptocurrency. It's gone forever. It's like having a safety deposit box in your house that has gold, and you lose the key, and it's such a powerful box that nobody can ever open it. There's no tool in the world that can open this, so the gold is gone. Now, physical Bitcoins, if we just extrapolate, go a little bit further, in my books, I wrote about physical coins that hold Bitcoin, and these were originally made over 10 years ago as educational tools to demonstrate how you can physically hold Bitcoin. And people still make them sometimes as again, collectibles for the most part. But really, all they are is the code. In these coins, you have a sticker on one side, and when you peel the sticker underneath there is the code to the Bitcoin. More often these days, people will hold what are called paper wallets, and they'll just print out a piece of paper, like a bill, and on there is the private key to the Bitcoin. So in this way, yes, you can hold Bitcoin in your home in a way that it doesn't exist anywhere else. But further to that, again, even in this case of self-custody today, most people, and what I recommend, is to use what are called offline wallets. Now, this is the same thing fundamentally as a paper wallet, but it's a digital device. It's like a USB key. So you can have a USB stick or a device that is like a USB stick that holds the Bitcoin in a sense, where no one can theoretically access it because it is not online.
So in this context, Hemang, let me ask you, Elias spoke about exchanges and some exchanges, and we have seen there have been some instances of exchanges, like here in India also, Elias, we had the case of WazirX, which lost a lot of money. And there is FTX, which we have heard. So in this context, are the exchanges really safe? And while choosing an exchange to trade on, what is the care that a new investor should take?
When we talk about exchanges losing money, yes, that has absolutely happened, and it will probably continue to happen in certain cases. And the reason it happens is some level of mismanagement, whether it's leading to the exchanges being hacked, whether it's leading to bad treasury management on part of the exchanges, etc. It's the same thing that if you have a bank and your bank gets robbed, theoretically, the bank can run out of money. Now, in practice, in our societies, in most countries, the banks are insured, which means that even if the bank is robbed, which doesn't really happen anymore, like it happened, 100 years ago, the government will insure all the deposits, or up to a certain amount of deposits. And when I say robbed, I mean it could also just be bankrupt. It could be sued and lose a lot of money, things like this. Now, when it comes to crypto exchanges, it's much, much more difficult for these exchanges to get insurance, to insure their deposits. And no government is, of course, doing this because cryptocurrencies are not government issued currencies. So frankly, governments don't care They're not interested in protecting the crypto holdings of their citizens like they're interested in protecting the fiat currency holdings in banks that they regulate. So this poorly run, or fortunately in some cases just unlucky. For that reason, a good recommendation is not to hold firstly all the money on one exchange for sure. Using several exchanges, using the exchanges for trading, but then again taking some of that money out of the exchange and keeping it at home in the form of these cold wallets, as I mentioned, is a good practice. It also depends on the amounts. If you have a small amount in crypto, if it's a very reliable exchange, I won't name any names of them, but ones that are very well run, that have long histories of 5 years or more operating without losing customer funds, those are good exchanges on average on probability. If it's a new exchange that hasn't existed 1 year ago, and there's no clarity about who is controlling it, do they have a physical office? Do they have a lot of employees? That's a red flag, and I would probably avoid this kind of exchange. That would be my thinking.
Hemang?
So to say something on top of it, I think so Elias has mentioned pretty much everything, but my point of view will also be the same, that we need to, if the new users or investors, they want to jump in, they should see how much regulated and how much compliances are there. Like if some exchanges are banked by some financial institutes, or if they are accepted by them, and like in the area of like certain countries, if they're abiding by the laws. And also to jump in the FTX contest, like FTX was pretty much was a very big centralized exchange, and during the time of Shiba Inu run, it almost had a volume of around $2 to $8 billion, and that was the loss of money as well. So basically, what happened in the FTX was same point that mentioned by Elias, that it was mismanagement. So basically, all the funds which was going by, like which was coming to the FTX, was actually going to another offshore company which was settled in Hong Kong, which was the name of Alameda Research, or Alameda Research, which was similarly under the name of Sam Bankman-Fried. And it was, so basically, when during the time of November, I think so 2022, when Coin Market Cap released its documentation about how the funds in the Alameda Research is handled, and all of it is coming from the FTX, then it shook down the entire market, and because of that, the Bitcoin price also went down. So basically, point I'm trying to make is that the exchanges that are continuously out there, which are publishing their public records, which are giving the audit to. So basically, in the case of WazirX as well, WazirX failed not because of mismanagement of funds, but it was failed because of a hack. So basically, it was essentially a multi-signature hack. So basically, to give a little brief about what multi-signature hack is, where there's a minimum threshold, so certain wallets are allowed, and if certain number of wallets vote for a transaction to pass, then a transaction is going to pass. So let's say there are six holders who can approve for a transaction, and the minimum threshold is of four. So if four of the approvers approve a transaction, then it is going to pass. So in this case, the WazirX, it lost $230 million, because first thing, the fund was there itself in a one account there, and it was there in a in a hot Ethereum wallet, and from that wallet the fund was lost. And it was a very well trained intrigue attack, which was, most people say it was carried out by Hazara's group, but it was again a result of penetration testing and all of these things. So basically, to look for the exchanges, the best thing is to check about the community, to check about the history, to check about the reliability, and to check if how much the exchange has performed, and how much resources they are putting into the security, because we see the security side of the blockchain industry is quite increasing, and many people often do not put and invest in this security. So basically, if you want to invest 100 million in security, or like 1 million in security, it can save around 2 to 3 billion asset in your high exchange. I think so it is a very good trade-off. So I would say all of these concerning points, to have a good community check, to see how much relevant history it is holding, and if it is spending enough budget on this security or not.
Okay.
Would just add on to this from my own experiences in the EU. In the EU, European Union, we have a new regulatory framework. It's called MiCA, Markets in Crypto Assets, and it's quite strict. It means that every exchange that wants to operate as a cryptocurrency exchange within Europe, it has to be fully regulated by a central bank of one of the European Union member states, be it France or Germany or Sweden or what have you. And these central banks have they're very strict. They require hundreds of pages of documentation for the application. They require various professionals on the team, from money laundering prevention experts to lawyers to accounting. They require very comprehensive business plans, plans for everything that might go wrong, technical specifications of everything, and regular reporting of activities. And they can also do checks to make sure that the exchanges are in compliance. So in this environment, in a very regulated environment, the safety, of course, increases, because you have to be pretty competent in order to even get the license to be accepted in the first place. Again, I don't know how the situation is in India, but certainly things are improving. And back to just FTX, I mean, it can be said that it was a huge embarrassment for the industry, and it was more than just mismanagement in this place. I mean, as far as the courts have determined, it was a case of criminal fraud, where the CEO was using the customer funds to personally invest and take high risks, and of course ended up losing a lot. So this was not a case of making a couple mistakes. It was a case of gross mismanagement of customer funds, and this is of course not supposed to happen. How an individual can determine if an exchange is legit, and again with FTX, they were sponsoring sports stadiums in Miami and all this. It was very difficult to make that determination. I would just say, don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah, that's so true. And also, in the case of like FTX, one more thing was that they were never publicly audited. So the records were never public. However, it was never public. So because it was entirely a private, so that was also the case of it. So it was for sure the biggest criminal fraud, I would say, in the recent exchanges history.
So in India, just Elias, you asked me regarding the India situation. So in India, we have an authority, FIU, Financial Intelligence Unit. This unit is a part of the AML law, anti-money laundering law in India, which is called as the PMLA. And they are the ones who regulate exchanges in India, give permissions, and deal with any issues that come with exchanges in India. So this is regarding the exchanges and the security. You have given a very good insight into what is the care and what are the steps to be taken while choosing an exchange, and how do you determine which exchange is to be taken. But now there is one more question, because right now there are 19 million active users of various crypto exchanges and the crypto market. But considering India's population of 1.5 billion, this is just the start. So the crypto adoption, India is number one in crypto adoption. This figure, which is just 19 million as of now, may exponentially rise in the near future. And with respect to this, now, a person who is coming into the crypto market, he has those traditional investments on one hand, like real estate, like gold, which he has traditionally invested in. And he has this new instrument of crypto, which is new. So, Elias, you have been all over the world. You have been to several international conferences. You have been a speaker at most, and you have been in this field since 2013. So what is the view regarding cryptos of the Western world, of the Gulf, and how is it changing? Because that can give a perspective even to the Indian investor who is newly thinking of entering this field, leaving behind, or at least making space for the cryptocurrencies in his portfolio.
So let's touch on gold. I know that gold is a huge part of not only Indian culture but investments. It's something that's held by families physically, and has been for generations, hundreds of years. If we think about one of the central ideas or competing ideas of what Bitcoin is, and what my idea of what Bitcoin fundamentally is digital gold. And I don't mean gold in the sense that it's the same thing, but I mean it fulfills the same function as gold. And if we look at if we ask the question is why gold? What is gold? And the first thing that anyone might think of is that, well, it's beautiful jewelry. But everyone knows that anyone can buy gold-colored jewelry for, nothing on the street. It looks the same. The purpose and the point of gold is not that it looks nice, even if that's sometimes what it's used for. It's the other way around. Gold is valuable, and the reason, in large part, it looks nice is because we associate it with being valuable and having power. Now, if we look a little bit deeper, is what are the characteristics of gold that make it valuable? Not just today, but all throughout history. And we can come up with a few characteristics. One of them is that gold is difficult to get. It doesn't grow on trees anywhere. In order to acquire gold, someone has to do a lot of work. Someone has to mine, it's dangerous, or someone in the past had to go to war and, risk their life to, steal it from someone else. Or they had to sell the family farm or goats or whatever you had and sacrifice in order to get the gold. To have gold meant that there was sacrifice. There was a lot of, something was exchanged, which that itself arguably is what gave it value. If I bring you a leaf from a tree, it won't be valuable because anyone can go and get it. But gold, well, good luck getting it. It's hard. So that's value. And when we look at Bitcoin, it's the same concept. In order to get Bitcoin, you need to mine with computers, and today that requires an extreme amount of computing power to to create $100 of Bitcoin. You need to expend probably $80 of electricity, or at least when it comes to the electricity and the machinery and everything, it's a very small profit margin. So there's work. It's called proof of work. The other thing of if we look at what is gold is that it's the same everywhere. 1 gram of gold in India, in China, whether it comes from a poor person, from a rich person, wherever it is, it's always the same. Just like a dollar is always the same. If you're exchanging something else, like I don't know what else should money, and people used to sell, trade seashells. They look kind of different, or rocks. And this rock is bigger than this one. Gold is always the same. The other aspect is that it's divisible. Just like I talked about, if you're exchanging goats, for example, as money. Well, how do you give change? This costs half a goat. Well, what are you going to do? You're going to cut it in half. Well, that comes with its own problems. Gold, you can have 1 gram, you can have 1 kilo, you can have 1 ton, you can take 100th of a gram, and it's the same. If we go to the next one, it's easily portable. Gold, you can hold a lot of value in a small amount. Just like theoretically, you could, sugar or salt has value, but you don't want to use that as a store of wealth because it's cumbersome, difficult to carry. Gold is the same. So if we look at all these characteristics fundamental of what made gold valuable, why it's held value, why it's been, and further, it's difficult to fake. You can't really fake gold. You can check, oh, this is real, this is fake. It's the same with Bitcoin. You can easily determine if it's real or not. So all these historical characteristics of gold, actually, Bitcoin has practically all of them. Arguably, it's a better technology if we think of gold not as an item, but as a technology of value transfer. And then if we go into the global picture, all the world's gold currently, it's worth about $22 trillion. Sorry, $22 trillion. And all Bitcoin is worth about $2 trillion. So today, Bitcoin is worth about 1/10 of the value of gold. And if that's the case, then I would make the argument is maybe it would be smart to have, if you have, 10 grams of gold, or $1,000 worth of gold, maybe it's smart to hold $100 worth of silver of Bitcoin. That's my argument.
That's true. And if we would have purchased it earlier, it would have given us 100x more return than gold. So Hemang, in this context, now when they talk about Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining, how sound is this Bitcoin, the blockchain technology? And when you talk about the blockchain technology that is storing the details of what has been the history of ownership of Bitcoin, how reliable it is, how secure it is that this information, can it be hacked or changed? And in this context, can you compare it with the banking system, the traditional banking system and the technology that used? Can you try and compare it and see like how reliable this is?
Sure, definitely. So I'll start with the last one and then I'll come backwards.
Yeah.
First, I'll try to compare and then we'll come to the security part. So basically, when we talk about traditional finance or banking system, as we said, so let's say like now also maybe 2 or a few years back as well, when I want to send money from here to Elias. Elias in like is in States right now. So what is going to happen is that my bank is going to be involved, Elias's bank is going to be involved, but the money is not going to be directly going instantly from my account to his account. So basically, if I want to make an instant transfer, so basically there is going to be several banks, at least 1 or 2 banks or up to 5 banks, which is going to be involved between it. Why? Because traditional finance requires trust. So if I want to send money from India to USA, I need to, the banks are going to have few other banks also involved. So they are going to, let's say, a veto a one bank, which is going to have branches on all of the other banks, and they are going to create trust, and then like through them the transaction is going to flow. So in this case, what is happening is that one single bank can be a single point of failure. If that bank fails, the transaction, the other like the all the other transactions, it's not going to happen, because all of them relies on one or two or three like other banks to complete the transaction. What is different in Bitcoin or blockchain is that it's peer-to-peer. So basically, if I want to send transaction from me to him, to you, to whoever, it's going to be peer-to-peer. So as also defined in the Bitcoin paper, it's a peer-to-peer electronic cash. So it does not need to involve any other parties in between. As far as I know your wallet address, as far as I know how to access my wallet address, I have funds in mind, I can send it to you. And in this, everyone, each of us, we behave as a peer. So let's say there are 8 of us in the group, and all of us are peers. And one of the peer, her name is Alice. She fails. So even if she fails, all of us are still going to function, because we are equivalently peer-to-peer connected to each other. And in this case also, we will be able to know, and when the transaction is also happening, all the other nodes which are in the part of this chain, they are also validating the transaction, they're also updating the data in themselves, and then we can also see it. So if there is some malicious node or like malicious authority involved, it cannot possibly do it, because most of the people are not malicious, only few of them are, and we can check them like how and why the transaction or data has been updated. So in this case, it is extremely secure, it is extremely fast, it is extremely transparent. I won't say extremely fast, because transaction per second is around 7, so which is not extremely fast if we compare to other like transactions. But as compared to banks, if a bank is taking 1 or 2 days, like if we do wire transfer or Revolut transfer, it still takes 1 day to transfer from one country to another. As compared to that, it is extremely fast. To also explain it in a good or like a better analogy, let's understand this as a blockchain is a wagon, it's a train. And in the train, what is happening is that in each of the compartment, you are sending people in. And once it is coming from one station to another station, what is happening? It is physically transferring you from one station to another station. So basically, when I'm transferring my Bitcoin to you, it is genuinely getting transferred from my account to your account, and I can see it. And at every station, there are going to be conductors who are going to come, who is going to check the tickets, and who are going to validate it. And all of them will have access to the history. So basically, they can trace back, they can check in the history, like there was 8 passengers in the first station, if there are 8 in the second station, and so on. And all of this are just moving forward. So if I want to go backward and change something, I won't be able to do it. If I go and want to change something which happened in the station 1, I won't be able to change it, because it is append only. It can only be traversed forward, it cannot be traversed backward. So that's how it is different from it. As compared to a point, I don't know if everyone is going to agree with me or not, but Bitcoin can become hackable in coming future, which is going to be 10 or 20 years or so, as far as quantum computing is going to advance. So basically, how a Bitcoin is attained is via a solving of a mathematical equation which requires computation power. To just explain it in a very layman's term. And for that, to solve that computation power, just as Elias mentioned a few minutes ago, that people need to mine it. And for mining it, they need to spend a lot of electricity, which is nothing but computation power. And that's why we see all across the world, there are talks about computation power and like the impacts it is having. So as soon as quantum computing is going to develop, it might be able to break the algorithm which was used to create the Bitcoin. So which is SHA-256, or maybe RSA. I'm like, I might be a little confused here, but yeah, it might be able to break it. So basically, in that case, it will be able to reverse. And once the Bitcoin transaction will be able to reverse, it will no longer hold the value it currently have. But that is far away in the future. But quantum computing still has a power to do it, and that's can be my take on it.
But in the current future, you feel it is secure.
It is extremely secure. And also, one more thing on this part. It came in 2008, and not a single day, not a single second, not a single hour, we have had a downfall, like a down server in the network. not a single point of failure till yet. And you compare it with traditional banks, we always see that there are somewhat few hacks, like every time which is happening and something's happening, hacks can happen, but the network, it is never going down. So that's my point on it.
Okay. So in this context, Elias, I wanted to ask you a question because I heard a lot of your videos. I've seen a lot of your videos. I've heard you in some conferences. So in one of the videos, you mentioned about zombie bitcoins, because what Hemang says is this is that secure network that once an ownership is mentioned and etched into the memory of the blockchain, it can never change. So therefore, in that context, you had mentioned something about a zombie Bitcoin. So can you tell us what that is?
Of course. So when you said when something is ownership is etched into the blockchain, it can't change. Now, of course, it can change if you can change it. That is that if someone deposits money into your bank account, uh, the money in your bank account is there forever until you send it somewhere else.
Right.
But if you forget your login information, then you can never send the money out of your bank account. It's stuck in your bank account forever. Now, again, if we're talking about a real bank, then you can go to the counter and say, I lost my account number. Here's my ID, and then you would get back your access because your bank account is registered to your name, and it's regulated under the law of a country. But when we're talking about a blockchain, Bitcoin specifically, the Bitcoin address is not registered to any individual in the same way that if you own a gold ring, it's not registered to you. You own it because you own it, and if you lose it, if you drop it in the ocean, and it's gone. So when we talk about zombie Bitcoin, it means Bitcoins that have not moved in a long time, and by that I mean that if you have it, it's like having it because in Bitcoin, you can see everything. You can see where all the Bitcoins are. You can see how much Bitcoin is in each account. You just can't see who owns which account or how many accounts any individual owns. So you can point at a bank account and say, oh, look, this bank account has, $50 million worth of Bitcoin, and no one has used this bank account for 8 years. And if no one has used this bank account for 8 years, and there's 50 million Bitcoin, $50 million of Bitcoin in there, then that suggests that nobody can actually, someone would have, used it, someone would have logged in, someone would have taken some out. So that in that point, I believe there's a certain designation at which point it becomes likely that the access is lost, and those Bitcoins can be termed zombie Bitcoins. And by that, it simply means that, actually, no, just to go back a little bit, those Bitcoins are considered lost. But sometimes what happens then is that someone comes and they do open a bank account that has been, not used for many, many years. And those Bitcoins that are thought to have been lost forever suddenly are moving again. And those are the zombie Bitcoins.
Okay.
They were thought to be gone, but they're back. And that happens. It's really not a relevant concept, but it's a fun way of understanding it.
Okay. Okay. So I think right now, just some thoughts we will try to understand that if now a person wants to enter into the crypto market as on date, would there be some advice or some pointers that you would like to give a person who is new to the crypto market, who is just entering the crypto market, who is just looking at it? What would be the first few points that a person has to ensure to save his money?
So it depends what reason they're going into the crypto market for. If you're going in with a small amount of money to gamble, then have at it. It's crazy. It goes up and down. You have all kinds of meme coins that didn't exist last week, and they're going to be zero next week. That is one thing. But I don't think that is the point that we're trying to that really has staying power. If we talk about making an investment, trying to speculate on the future of this industry, I think we're talking about primary cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin foremost, Ethereum, some others that are in the top 10, top 30 maybe. But really, the advice I would give is that if you think that there's maybe a future in this movement, buy Bitcoin, maybe buy Ethereum, maybe buy Solana. Those are really the three that I would say that, it might be worth speculating on. And if the blockchain industry, hasn't disappeared in 10 years, 20 years, then I think Bitcoin will probably be a lot more valuable at that point. So in that perspective, that would be my recommendation. And I would recommend, again, don't hold everything in one exchange if it's a very large amount for you. Also, don't invest too much. Invest amounts that that is acceptable to lose, even though hopefully that doesn't happen. You should primarily invest in things you understand. And of course, now you're learning a little bit, so maybe it's okay to try with a little bit, but it should be kept in a proportion.
Elias, Hemang, thank you so much. Basically, crypto to most, as I told you, only 19 million are there in the market and 1.5 billion out there who still don't know much about the crypto sector. So thank you so much for the insights, for the experience that you have shared with the viewers. I think it will be a great learning experience for anybody who wants to enter into the crypto market. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having us here.